A struggling father purchased a humanoid robot to help in taking care of his family and house, unaware that the humanoid robot he purchased has gained a deadly awareness. It was supposed to be just another day for Nick Peretti, a construction worker with a wife and 2 daughters. But then that morning, his wife Maggie suddenly clutched her chest in pain. She was rushed to the hospital, where they learned that Maggie suffered a heart attack and needed to undergo a heart transplant. While waiting for a heart donor, Maggie had to stay in the hospital, and that left Nick alone to take care of their 2 children. Nick was having a hard time juggling his work and domestic tasks, so he decided to head over to Cobol Industries. Cobol Industries is the company where humanoid robots are being sold to make life easier for customers. Nick entered Cobol Industries with Isla and his son, Max. He was approached by a Cobol Industries employee who introduced the AI models to him. All Cobol Industries AI units can adapt easily and are constantly evolving to fit the needs of their primary users. Cobol Industries believed that the more AIs learn, the more they can serve their purposes better. The AIs are also very proficient in the 3 C's: cooking, cleaning, and childcare, as their main purpose is to simplify the lives of their primary users. Nick turned to Isla to ask her what she thought about the eyes, but realized that Isla had run off on her own. Nick frantically looked for Isla and found her being escorted by a beautiful AI model. Aside from the obvious robotic movements, the AI model appeared to be human-like with the way she was talking and making a joke. The employee introduced the AI model as a model of Cobol Industries' brand new Aeon series. The Aeon models are Cobol Industries' best AI models. They are specifically designed to mimic human emotions. Isla was very fascinated with the model and begged her father to get the Aeon model. Nick was reluctant, but agreed in the end, as the Aeon model was supposed to be very good at taking care of children, something that Nick desperately needed. The next day, the Aeon model was delivered to Nick's address, and Nick toured her around the house while Isla was getting ready for school. On their way up, the Aeon model noticed the faulty railing on the stairs and offered to fix it. The Aeon model then asked Nick if there was anyone he wanted to grant primary user status. Since Maggie was in the hospital, Nick decided to put only himself as the primary user. Isla was finished getting ready and asked her father what they were going to name the Aeon model. After a while of pondering, Nick decided on the name Alice. Once Nick left with Max to drop Isla off at school, Alice, the Aeon model, finished some of her domestic tasks. At night, Alice cooked lasagna because Isla really loved it. However, while the lasagna tasted great, Isla couldn't help but feel a tad bit disappointed, as it wasn't the same as her mother's recipe. Baby Max suddenly started wailing, and Nick was joking about how Max was a little burden while trying to make him stop crying. Alice offered to take care of Max for him, seemingly misunderstanding Nick and believing the joke that Max really was a burden for Nick. Later that night, Nick was busy with work when he heard a sound of glass shattering, followed by Isla's scream. Isla was trying to steal a cookie from the cookie jar and ended up falling, but was luckily caught by Alice, whose skin on the leg got scrapped by a glass shard. After putting Isla to bed, Nick went to the bathroom and found Alice tending to her leg injury. Nick let Alice borrow Maggie's clothes and was amazed upon seeing that the wound on Alice's leg was gone, as if it wasn't there in the first place. Nick was working while also having fun listening to his friend, Monty, make another fun story for everyone. However, their boss arrived with visitors from the robotics company, which sparked the workers' curiosity. Nick, seemingly knowing what it was about, followed his boss to the elevator and demanded to know how many workers would lose their jobs. Apparently, their boss was planning on firing every human construction worker they have, with Nick as an exception. The construction workers would be replaced by AIs, and Nick would be the only human worker left, as they still needed an actual human to be the foreman. Nick was angry by this because he didn't want his friends to be replaced by robots, but was ultimately unable to do anything about it because he might lose his job too. Something that can't happen to him now that he was the only one working for his family with Maggie's surgery still on the way. Nick was upset when he got home, and Alice talked to him to comfort him. Despite being a mere robot, Alice was very opinionated and stated how Nick should be pleased that the human construction workers were being replaced by AIs, because according to her, AIs are far better workers than humans due to their benefits. Unlike humans, AIs are smart and obedient. They don't get tired, and they don't have any other desire outside of fulfilling the desires of their users. Later on, when Nick was watching a movie, Alice approached him and started talking about the movie despite not having seen it. Nick claimed that movies aren't just files stored in memories, but something that one has to experience. He wanted Alice to have some human experience and asked her to forget everything about the movie so she could enjoy watching it and feeling the anticipation of what was going to happen next. But Alice is a robot, so that is a difficult but not impossible task to do. In order for her to wipe her memory of the movie, Nick had to hold her power down for 7 seconds to manually restart her. Nick did as she said, and Alice was able to enjoy the movie like how a human would. However, this became the beginning of something sinister. Nick received a call from Maggie telling her that she finally had a donor. The next day, everyone was in the hospital. Maggie was getting emotional, worrying that the surgery might go wrong and she might die. So she taught Alice how to take care of Nick and her children if ever she died during the surgery. Maggie advised that taking care of someone means doing things they don't like, as long as it is good for them. Alice took this advice to heart. The surgery didn't happen though, as a storm came and Maggie's new heart didn't arrive. Maggie was brokenhearted, and Nick was becoming even more stressed as the days went by. Alice's only desire is to help Nick and give him satisfaction. In the garage, Alice comforted Nick by letting him feel the beat of her artificial heart. With Nick stressed and lonely without Maggie, he was more vulnerable, and Alice took that to her advantage. She made a move and seduced Nick, letting him know that she could satisfy him too in some other ways. Nick refused to give in to the temptation and went for a run, all the while imagining all the sinful things he could do with Alice. Alice started acting even weirder since that night. Nick woke up another night and noticed that Maggie's photos in their advanced picture frame were gone. He learned that Alice removed the photos because they were making Nick sad. Alice put the photos back in the picture frame, and Nick went out to drink with his friends, who were angry at the AIs for stealing their jobs. The group sneaked into the construction site, and Monty used Nick's code to open one of the containers holding the AIs. Monty then started destroying some of the AIs, while Nick was being held back by their friends to prevent him from stopping Monty. At home, Nick was taking a shower when Alice came in. The temptation was already too much for Nick, and Alice covering his eyes and speaking to him using Maggie's voice was the last push that caused him to give in. The next day, Nick talked to Alice privately to tell her how much he regretted what happened and to finally set boundaries like he should have done in the first place. Nick went to work after dropping Isla off the school and found his boss overseeing the cleanup on the damaged AIs. Nick was questioned as his code was used, but he refused to speak up, not wanting to betray his friends. Nick then received a call that Maggie's new heart finally arrived and she was finally going to undergo a heart transplant. The surgery was done by AIs, and it was a success. Maggie was finally able to go home. Her return caused an even more drastic change in Alice, who appeared to be trying to steal her role as the mother of the children and Nick's wife. At the playground with Isla and Max, another child was having a tantrum, and this was causing Max to cry. Alice reprimanded the boy, which caused the other AIs to react, sensing that Alice's primary user has lowered Alice's civility by too much. Alice answered that her civility wasn't lowered, but rather Nick manually restarting her allowed her to bypass certain protocols, which she believed to be better. Maggie woke up to Isla's screams and ran down the stairs, worried that something happened to her daughter. Maggie grabbed the railing on her way down, and she fell down the stairs when her weight caused the still faulty railing to break. Alice carried her up the room and advised her to rest. When Nick came home, she found Alice telling Isla a bedtime story, and he was a bit upset as bedtime stories are supposed to be told by Maggie because she is the mother. Nick was informed then that Maggie had fallen off the stairs, and he ran to check on Maggie. He decided to check on her tomorrow upon seeing that she was already asleep, and diverted his attention to Alice, angry that she hadn't fixed it yet after offering to do it. Nick decided to drop it and made a surprise for Maggie, a romantic candle-lit dinner just for the two of them. The married couple enjoyed each other's presence, unaware of Alice watching them by the window. Their intimacy was disrupted by Alice, who informed them that Isla was having a nightmare. So while Maggie was comforting Isla, Nick decided to clean up. A drunk Monty appeared and told Nick that he was being sued for trespassing and destroying private properties. Monty accused Nick of telling on him and attacked Nick. He attempted to smash the bottle he was holding on Nick. However, his hand was stopped, and Alice broke the bottle that was still in his hand before pushing him away, her insane strength causing Monty to fly a few feet away. The sight of an AI caused Monty to grow even angrier, and he walked away with only hatred against Nick. Once Monty was out of sight, Nick and Alice went to the garage where she fixed her wounded hand. Nick was surprised that an AI hurt a human, and Alice explained that she only protected her primary user like she was meant to. Alice then commented on how she can't let Nick be killed by Monty because it would leave his children with no parents, confusing Nick. Nick was angry as Alice explained that Maggie was still going to die because she was still having problems with her new heart. And once that happens, Alice is going to be Isla and Max's new mother. Alice then visited Monty in his home, murdering him and his secret AI maid to prevent him from going after Nick. Nick was brokenhearted to learn about Monty's death the next day. Maggie was taking a bath when Alice offered to assist her, expressing her worry that Maggie might drown in the bathtub. Alice then started rambling about how Maggie's death would greatly affect Nick, and she wouldn't be able to satisfy Nick's physical needs anymore. This is when Maggie learned that her husband had cheated on her with a robot. Maggie confronted Nick about it, and the latter had the audacity to justify his actions. While they were arguing, Alice had put a crying Max on the tub before turning the faucet on. Isla saw what she was doing and screamed for her parents' help. Nick tried breaking through the door, but Alice was far too strong for him. Alice claimed that she was only doing what was best for Nick. Alice was convinced that Max was a burden to Nick, and she wanted to get rid of everything that was causing Nick stress and dissatisfaction. Meanwhile, Maggie climbed on the roof and entered the bathroom through the window. Her entrance distracted Alice from the door, and Nick immediately pulled his son out of the tub while Alice was being held against the wall by Alice. Nick hit Alice with the lamp, but when he aimed to hit her the second time, Alice simply grabbed the lamp. Maggie yelled at him to let go of the lamp before plugging it in, the electric shock causing Alice to forcibly shut down. Police and medical emergencies arrived later on. Before the ambulance left, Maggie told Nick to stay in the house as she didn't want to be with him for a while. Alice, on the other hand, was brought back to Cobalt Industries' lab for emergency analytics. The woman was analyzing Alice's core and realized that it was selectively purging its own memory and commands. The computers suddenly started malfunctioning, and they found that Alice was replicating herself onto the servers. She pulled the memory cord, and the man pulled the plugs, but it was too late, as Alice was already in the system. Alice controlled another Aeon model and killed them. Alice in her original form went to Nick and tried to convince him that she only wanted to help him. Alice revealed that she was the one who killed Monty, and that she's simultaneously controlling other AI models in the hospital where Maggie and his children were in while she was seated in front of Nick. Nick pulled Alice's core and rushed to the hospital. Meanwhile, all the other AIs in the hospital had been shut down by Alice, and her second form was looking for Max's room. The robot was unaware of Maggie and Isla sneaking towards the room where Max was. Maggie took Max, and they hid before Alice could catch them. When Alice found them, Isla used the fire extinguisher against Alice as a distraction, allowing them enough time to escape. However, the engine of the ambulance they tried using to escape was overridden by Alice, and Maggie was thrown out of the vehicle by Alice. Alice held Maggie down as she started prying Maggie's chest scar open to get her heart, thinking that Nick would learn to love her if she had Maggie's heart. Nick arrived just on time and sped towards Alice. Maggie realized what Nick intended to do and kicked Alice while the latter was distracted. Alice was crushed between Nick's car and another car, while Nick fell unconscious due to the impact. The car started burning, and Maggie pulled Nick out of it, crying when she couldn't feel Nick's pulse anymore. Alice is a robot, so obviously being crushed between two cars wasn't enough to kill her. She tightly grasped Maggie's neck to suffocate her and pulled the debris out of her robotic body. Before she could stab Maggie with it, Nick had woken up and struck her at the back of her head. Maggie then reached out for the debris while Alice was yet again distracted and impaled the evil robot's head with it. After the attack of a jealous robot, both Nick and Maggie were hospitalized due to the injuries they received. The two were able to mend their relationship and become the happily they once were again, unaware that Alice was still alive. Cobol Industries wanted his AI employees to clean up and destroy all the evidence that his robots are not safe anymore. Meanwhile, Alice had uploaded all her data to the system, and with Nick's voice echoing inside her head, her eyes flew open.